What's up, guys? Hopefully you know me, Zap, your membership and Renew Nashville program manager. Super stoked to have Greg Skloot here. Greg is a longtime EC advisor. He's met with a ton of our companies, helped them out, and just really a successful entrepreneur himself with Crystal Knows, and obviously an expert in personality, which I think is like such a fun topic. You know, financial modeling, sales, that can get a little boring, but personality stuff is always fun. So you get to do the fun stuff today. Anyways, super grateful to have advisor Greg here. Anyways, Greg, I'm going to hand things off to you then.
Fantastic, Zap. Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here. Good to see everybody. I'm going to share my screen. Let's make sure that works. Perfect. And let's go into presentation mode. Whoop. All right. All right. Can everybody see the colorful wheel on my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. And let me also. Says it's fine. Okay. Okay. Let's just go for it. Cool. All right. Still see the colorful wheel?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. All right. Well, again, everybody, great to be here. Zap, thanks so much for having me. Again, my name is Greg Skloot. I'm a co-founder and president of Crystal. We're a software company based here in Nashville. And we build tools to help people and organizations better understand personality through a framework called DISC, which I'm going to tell you all about today. As Zap said, this is definitely one of the more interesting topics, and it is so universally applicable. Whether it's for business, for personal, understanding this type of stuff, especially other people's personalities and communication style, it is like unlocking almost a new superpower, certainly like learning a new language to better understand one another. So I think it's going to be a really interesting talk today. So we will dive right in. So we'll kind of kick off with answering this fairly important question. Why are we talking about personality, and why does it matter so much? So in a nutshell, it comes down to relationships. And if you think about all of the aspects of the businesses we're all running today, whether it's sales or hiring or building a strong team, much of our success is coming down to building strong relationships with others, building trust with others, and motivating them to take action, whether it be taking the right action on working on the right things as a coworker, making a purchase as a customer, taking the job as a potential job candidate. So if we can do anything to help build these stronger relationships and have better interpersonal communication, the downstream effects are just incredibly impactful. And this is essentially what I just said, right? By understanding more about someone's personality, we end up with these stronger, enjoyable, more effective relationships. And when I say personality, as a quick definition here, I'm talking about someone's kind of like natural, innate traits. So behavioral traits, communication style, motivations, strengths, blind spots, what energizes someone, what stresses them, kind of like what makes you, you. And historically, these are all things that we observe, that we could see happening in real life. And sometimes we haven't always had the language to be able to describe how someone behaves. We can point out specific traits, but DISC introduces what I almost like to think of as a new language to better understand how people are wired and how they behave. And if we understand that, we can ultimately build stronger relationships that help all of us reach our goals, whether it's for our personal careers, for again, winning a customer, hiring someone, and anything in between. So that is what we're going to be focused on today, learning this new language. Now, if anybody's gone through learning a language like Spanish or French or anything else, this is going to be a much easier language. It clicks really fast, and when it does, I promise you'll get this aha moment where it's like, oh, that makes so much sense. And things that I observed in people's behavior now all of a sudden make a lot more sense. So it's a really cool language. And the good news is it is going to click, and we're all going to learn it today during this session. So it's going to be very productive. So DISC, I've mentioned this a couple times. This is the essence of what my company Crystal does, is we integrate this DISC personality framework, particularly for other companies. We help them integrate it into their sales, hiring, and management processes. So everything that involves people. So DISC is a personality model. It dates, the components of it date all the way back to ancient Greece. The DISC itself has been around for about 100 years. And it's a personality model that helps us understand ourselves and the people around us. A simpler way of describing it is like a language that helps describe why and how people behave the way they do. What someone's wiring is. It's a more like simplistic term. So DISC, there's 4 letters of the word, and they each stand for a quadrant on this personality map. So the D is dominant, the I is influential, the S is steady, and the C is conscientious. So this personality map, you'll see here, each of these quadrants, the top left is the D, top right is the I, bottom right the S, bottom left the C. And you'll notice in between, so for example, between a C and a D, you can have both. So basically, each of these categories represents a group of personality traits that someone might exhibit. And everybody is kind of a mutt, right? We're all a mix of these different traits. And so in some cases, you might have some of the C traits, I'll explain what those are very soon, and some of the D traits. So your personality type could be a CD. Or if you have a bit more of the D traits and a little less of the C traits, you might be a DC. Or you might just be all D traits, you're a solid D. So that's what these little letters mean, right? A D, just have D traits, and I, just I traits. A DI, you have a bit of the D and the I. And these words across the top, we call these archetypes. So these are just helpful descriptors for almost like a nickname for each of the DISC types that are kind of fun to remember. So that is a quick overview of this personality map. And we're going to see everybody here will land somewhere in this map. You'll notice there are these 4 big sections, the D, I, S, and C. And it's further broken down into 16 of these pie slices. So there are these 16 subtypes that we all fit into. Everybody falls on one part of this map. Now, there's also plenty of differences even between 2 people that fall into the same slice. We'll talk about that too. But for our language learning so far, there's this personality framework called DISC that better explains how people interact and how they're wired and how they behave. DISC is made up of these 4 quadrants, D, I, S, and C, each that have personality traits associated with them. And we could further break it down into these subtypes. There's 16 of them, and each are a combination of D, I, S, and C. So keep going from there. So why don't we do a quick run through? I've just used the letters, but nobody knows what the heck a D means. So let's actually define what each of these types actually refers to. So we'll start with the D. So the D is the top left of the personality map. So D types, and by the way, I am in this group, they tend to be assertive, ambitious, intense, fast-paced, and goal-oriented. So each type has a set of natural strengths and blind spots. No type is better or worse than another. They all have these strengths and weaknesses. So the strengths of a D include allowing them to move really quickly, take charge when necessary. At the same time, they have some blind spots. They could be pushy, they could be over aggressive, they could sometimes be a little domineering. So this sounds like you when you're in a bad mood. That is a good indicator you might be this D personality type. So D types, while not all leaders are D types by any means, often D types tend to gravitate towards leadership roles. Mark Cuban is a good example here. Okay, then we have the I types. These are in the top right of the personality map. The I types, these are the fun ones, right? These are the enthusiastic, cheerful, outgoing, relaxed, and casual. Super people-oriented, often the life of the party, likes to talk all the time, can kind of come in and win over a room. At the same time, just like every other, I types have some blind spots. They can sometimes be unfocused because they're thinking about so many different things. They can miss a detail. They can sometimes be inconsistent, but they're great to invite to a party. Zap, as I'm talking, do you have any idea what your personality type might be?
Yeah, I know what I am.
Yeah.
I'm a big D, little I.
Yeah,
But a lot of
that is
people think
exactly
I'm a
right.
big I. Oh no, you thought I was an I.
I thought you had both, but you definitely have a bunch of this
You don't
I
see
type
my
personality.
the public only sees my I side. You ask my team, they'll tell you I'm a D.
There you go. Exactly. So a little bit of both. That's great. And right, Paletti and Taylor Swift is a good example of a classic I personality type. And a little bit of Zap. Okay, so next we have the S types. This is in the bottom right of the personality map. S types, these are folks that are more calm, patient, supporting, peaceful, warm. S types tend to be really great at comforting someone, of providing support, of preventing politics from running amok. Right, can be a really great person to be around. At the same time, blind spots of an S types can be overly cautious. They could be more passive aggressive. They could delay making a decision because they don't want to take a big risk. So that's kind of the trade-off with an S type. Often I say it, of course, parents come in all different personality types. I have heard that S types tend to make great moms. My mom was an S type, and it tends to resonate really well based on what I know about moms, because my mom was an S. I'm sure there's great moms in all types, but my mom was an S, or is an S. Right, and Gandhi would be a good example of an S type. And then finally, C types. This is in the bottom left of the personality map. The C types, these are the logical, skeptical, precise, analytical, reserved, and systematic. These are your classic bridge builders, literally, not like putting people together, but like building a bridge. So someone who is really thinking about the details, can be skeptical and question things, and make sure that we get things right. Now, at the same time, blind spots of a C type, they can be more critical. They can be more towards a perfectionist because they really want to get it right. They can be more risk averse if they don't have all the pieces in place. So that's how we need to balance out C types. Mark Zuckerberg as a great example of a C type. So that is a quick high level of each of these types. The D, the assertive, kind of fast-paced, but also can be pushy. The I, that exciting, talkative, life of the party, people-oriented, but also sometimes unfocused. The S, calming, supportive, but sometimes also could be passive-aggressive. And the C, detail-oriented, get it right, but also could sometimes be a perfectionist. Right? These are the four broader categories of where we all fall into. So I'll use myself as an example here. I fall in right between the D and the DC. I actually think I trend more DC on this personality map, which we joke is a very dangerous type because I both understand the details and I'm very forceful about it. So DCs can be very productive, but very dangerous because we get a lot done, but we could piss people off along the way. So that's the DC type. Now, importantly, as you're all thinking about like this personality map, important to realize here that the location on the map explains a lot about how someone behaves. It won't have all the answers, but it gives us a lot of clues into someone's kind of natural behavior and what gives them energy. I'll explain this a bit more. So if you are on the top or bottom of the personality map, so either a D and an I or an S and a C, you have very different feelings towards control and stability. So the y-axis here measures how someone interacts with their environment. Typically, those at the top of the map, like a D and an I, tend to seek control. They're more control-oriented. They want to guide and direct and lead and persuade others. While those at the bottom tend to be more stability-oriented, where they want to structure, organize, plan, and adapt to others. Notice, neither of these is better or worse. We need both, and we need them to balance each other out. Now, if we don't have each other balancing out, this can start to explain where people have natural conflicts. For example, suppose you and your business partner are both a D and an I. In fact, Zap was talking about my business partner, Drew. He is an ID. I'm a DC. So we are both here at the top. I'm right over here and Drew's over here. So we're not right on top of each other, but we're pretty close. And what that means is that we sometimes will have control conflicts where we both want to be in the driver's seat. And of course, only one person can be in the driver's seat. So we have had to get used to recognizing that different times, each of us will be driving and one of us has to be comfortable being in the passenger seat during that time. Otherwise, we'll constantly be butting heads. Now, at the same time, had we been a C and an S, which is very common, whether it's a business partnership, you and your significant other, we can sometimes have a control vacuum where neither person is comfortable sitting in the driver's seat. So as a result, you might go in circles. You might not be as quick to make a decision. Nobody's kind of willing to step up and say, here's what we're going to do. So that's the y-axis, control. Those, if you land at the top, you tend to be more control oriented. And if you land at the bottom, you tend to be more stability oriented. Okay, now let's look at the x-axis here. So the x-axis between over on the left where we have the D and the C and the right, the I and the S, tends to balance autonomy and affiliation. So this measures how we interact with others. Those on the left tend to seek autonomy. They want personal space, privacy, and independence. Whereas those on the right tend to seek affiliation, involving with others, sharing and getting along, right? The lone wolf versus the social butterfly. So everybody, think about a relationship, it could be a friend that you've had in the past where you had a situation where perhaps one of you was on the left and was totally fine, not talking that much, kind of doing your own thing. And when you talk, it's great, but you don't have to be connected all the time. And the other person wants to talk to you every day. And you're thinking, if let's say you're a C, right? You're down here in the blue. You're thinking, gosh, my friend who is an I up here is needy. Why does he have to talk to me all the time? I want my independence. And I is up here thinking, geez, why does she never want to, does she not like me? Why didn't you want to talk to me? And that is a classic conflict that we could have here, right? Natural independence on the left and natural affiliation on the right. So just looking at these could explain a lot about a natural conflict that can come up between between people, whether it's you and a customer, you and your significant other. Think about how this could come into play with a customer, right? If a customer is on this side of the map and you're constantly reaching out to them thinking you're providing great service, they're thinking, whoa, give me some space. You're doing too much. And you're thinking, I want to just help them and provide good support. So as I alluded to earlier, right? This archetype this is not a golden bullet. It won't predict silver bullet. A golden bullet's not a thing. It's not a silver bullet. Personality archetype does not predict your behavior in every situation. But what it does do is it describes how much or how little energy it takes for you or anyone to behave in a certain way. So for example, here I am sitting over in the D region, that top left, which means, right, assertive, fast-paced, goal-oriented. That's what comes naturally to me, right? So I'm in this captain archetype. I straddle captain architect, but I'm right over here. So I like control and autonomy. And as my team will tell you, it takes very little energy for me to be direct, to be assertive, to be competitive when needed. That is right up my alley. I can wake up in the morning. I don't even have to drink any coffee, and I'm doing that stuff. However, it takes a lot more energy for me to be overly patient, to be super casual, to be really creative and visionary. It's not that I can't do those things. I'm not incapable, but it's just not my comfort zone. It takes up more energy. I have to push myself to do it. So here is a great visual of things that come naturally to each type of personality. So here I am, right? Leading a team through an emergency, improving systems for efficiency. Heck yeah, I could do that all day. But if I have to come over and cheer someone up after a hard day, now that doesn't mean I'm a jerk. It doesn't mean I can't do that. But as my family will tell you, it is not my specialty. It takes a bunch of extra push and effort and energy from my end to do that, right? Same with meeting new people at a party. I can do it. I don't just like sit there and stumble over, but it's not my same comfort zone. Whereas I bet Zap over here, she could walk in and meet a lot of new people at a party, speak in front of a large group like that. That is her jam over here. Whereas if we made her like hang out working in spreadsheets all day and never talk to people, again, she can work in a spreadsheet. She's not incapable of it, but she probably wouldn't feel super fulfilled, right? It would be like, oh, I'm going out of my natural state to do this thing that I have to get done, but I'd be so much more energized if I could hang out over here in the I region, right? Speaking in front of a group, meeting new people, negotiating. That's her jam, her comfort zone. So a good way to think about this is the further you imagine the map as like like you're driving. Okay, and we all have our home base. Keep doing that. We all have our home base, right, where our personality type is. If the further on the map you have to drive, the further you have to go. So for me, going all the way over to here, the more energy it takes. Think about energy like gasoline in a car. So if every day my job was purely to cheer people up, I was someone who's, my whole role was emotional support. Oh my goodness, I could do it, but I'd be kind of miserable. I'd be driving back and forth and back and forth versus if I could just spend all day improving systems for efficiency. Yeah, I barely have to drive at all. I have no commute. I'm working from home. So think about if we understand DISC, if we understand this stuff, and we can meet people where they are, I can make sure that in my team, I can put my team members in the right places so the people that are great with data can work in data, and I'm never pushing them to negotiate with salespeople because that's not their natural position. It helps put everybody in a place where they are the most energized. And this applies in personal life, in your recruiting, in your team building, in your selling, the way you interact with customers. It applies universally if you are dealing with another human being. And once it clicks, when we see this, we can go, oh, that's why that person was feeling that way. Because their comfort zone is over here, but they were hanging out down here, planning an event. They could do it. They just kind of don't like it that much. And now I understand why. So, now, as we were just talking about, right, your job, your relationship, your goals may require you to adapt your behavior and stretch out of your comfort zone. I'm going to have to comfort people when they're having a bad day, right? And I need to get comfortable, like stretching from my natural DC state over to that comfort people zone. Just as Zap might have to open up a spreadsheet sometimes. If we understand personality, we can ultimately communicate more effectively, write more persuasively, and build trust faster. If we understand where people are coming from and where their natural place is, and how we may need to shift accordingly, we can be much more effective. Now that I understand that Zap is a DI, I can make sure I treat her like a DI. And this is a really important piece. In fact, I usually mention at the beginning of this presentation, but I must have forgot it. So I'll throw it in now. Speaking of my mom, who is an S, one of the things that she said to me, and I bet many of us have heard this before, right, is like the golden rule of we want to treat people the way you want to be treated, right? Haven't we all heard that when we were growing up? You want to be a good person, treat people the way you want to be treated. It turns out that is actually flawed advice because the way you want to be treated might be very different than the way I want to be treated. So I'm going to turn it on its head. Don't treat people the way you want to be treated. Treat people the way they want to be treated, because a D wants to be treated very differently than an S. And if you understand that little not so complex secret, it is a key to having, winning people over, communicating more effectively, again, writing persuasively, building trust, building stronger relationships. So let's walk through this with an example. I pulled a couple of friends and coworkers here to kind of highlight what I mean. So my friend Randall is going to be one. Now Randall's a DI, so actually very close to Zap's type. Outgoing and decisive, likes to shape new ideas, not super, doesn't want to spend a lot of time hanging out in a spreadsheet. things that I'd want to do if I'm conversing with Randall. Right? I want to make sure that I am keeping the conversation focused because he can jump around a lot between different ideas. I don't want to go too deep into the details. I want to start with a higher level summary because he's a much more big picture thinker. Right? If he was a C, that'd be very different, but he's not. I types, and see if Zap backs this up, tend to be much more visual. So if I'm conversing with him, I shouldn't just send him a giant Docker spreadsheet, surprise, surprise, but I should have visual aids. And I need to react quickly because he's not going to hold back on giving me feedback. I need to plan to react to that quickly in a conversation because he's going to bounce around. At the same time, if I'm interacting with him, and I think this is a scenario around like a negotiation. Did I say that? Yeah, it's a negotiation. So, right, I don't want to talk too much about like harp on past experience. He's focused on the here and the now. I don't want to go deep into like the risks or the downsides. A DI tends to be much more typically like positive, like bold energy, like wants to take a big risk, doesn't want to get mired in the details or the like what could go wrong. Rather would get excited about what could go right. Right, I don't want to bury him in data. I don't want to go into too much detail. Right? Very different than a different type of person. But for him, if I go into too much detail, I'm going to lose his attention. We don't want that. So if I was writing an email to him, right, I would want to make sure that the subject is really compelling and pique his interest. Make it a little mysterious. By the way, I, as a DC, would hate that subject, but Randall would like it because he's a different type, right? And I love that subject. Budget 29 tells me exactly what I want. For him, he'd find it boring. So all the difference, right? We want to for him, visual expressive language tends to resonate better. And again, going into excessive detailed lists and bullets tend to be go over less well with someone like Randall. So you can see here on the map, and I swapped Randall to a different character, but we're going to pretend that's his picture, all the same. Here he is up here as an initiator, and then my colleague Brittany down here is an SC, right, a planner. So so different, right? When I see that question come in, when you're interacting with a DI, right, we are tending to embrace bold risks. When I'm interacting with a DI, I am sometimes not taking everything he or she says seriously. Our head of sales is a DI, and he'll come to me with these big crazy ideas, and he's like really worked up about it, and I always know like that he wants to get that out, and then it's gonna slowly filter down into what we actually do. I never panic when he comes to me with like high energy because I know like that's how he communicates, that's how he gets it out. Now, if Brittany down here, if she came to me with like really high energy, I'd be panicked because that means something really important's going on because that's very out of character for someone in her zone over here down at the SC. So, convincing someone like Randall in this initiator step, right? We want to be charming. We want to talk about action items and next steps. We want to delight and surprise him. Talk about a big vision for the future. Polar opposite for Brittany. All the things that would land you in the doghouse with Randall would be great for Brittany. Going over past accomplishments and credentials. Don't be too forceful. Don't be too fast-paced or overly demanding. Walk through kind of the detail of how you might implement whatever you're doing. Expect and address apprehension or hesitation. So, negotiating with them, and I gave a little bit of color to this earlier, right? We want to keep the conversation on topic because Randall might bounce around. Try to relate whatever we're talking about to like some trend that he's seen out in the world, like that other people are doing. Be cool if he might make a really quick decision and then might change his mind and come back. Far more likely from a DI type. Is that they can bounce around and make different decisions within a conversation until they finally land on where they want to go. Brittany, on the other hand, we want to pepper her with well-supported facts. We want to go much more methodically, ask her lots of discovery questions and get relevant details. Right? We really want to avoid rushing them. Randall has no problem being rushed. Brittany will be much more likely to be irritated if she feels rushed. That's not how she's wired. doesn't mean she is like more or less effective than Randall. She just processes information differently. Yeah. I'm gonna, I see those questions. I'm gonna answer them as I go. As we think about these different types, there are some broader trends across each quadrant. So yes, and like an example here, like S's and SCs and this SC and this SC is kind of like an equal parts S and C, where Brittany is more S and little c, so less C. Ugh, that's a mouthful. Brittany has more S and less C. So more S traits, less C traits. Yes, there are broad trends across these 4 quadrants, but certainly each subtype has has things that are more specific. Okay. Whew. Oh my gosh, that was a lot of info, wasn't it? So let me pause here. That was the big items that we're going to talk about around DISC. As general next steps, and of course, be happy to turn it over to questions too. If you want to learn more about this, our website has tons of free resources around DISC, crystalknows.com/DISC. You can take a free DISC assessment, if anybody hasn't already, to find out where they fit in this map and all of their kind of natural traits. If there's someone you don't know, part of what Crystal does is we can predict a DISC type using AI and machine learning. So we can analyze a LinkedIn profile and predict a DISC type, which is really cool. Right? You can take the assessment. And if you're really interested in this stuff, in addition to any questions I'm happy to answer now, my co-founder and I wrote a book all about this called Predicting Personality that widely published last year. And it goes into way more depth on everything I just said. All right. I'm going to take a big swig of water. Zap would love to turn it over to a conversation, questions.
Yeah, I think we have some questions in the chat to kick things off, but also would love if people eventually unmute themselves. So it's just not me and Greg talking. But Colin asks, is there any interaction trends across each quadrant, or is each type its own bubble in a way?
Yeah. I hit that question in the last section. So there are trends across each quadrant. So like lots of the S's share traits, but certainly an SC is going to be different than an S. And not surprisingly, so I'd say it's simple, the SC will have more C traits. So there'll be a mixture of that kind of stable, methodical, calm with the detail-oriented, analytical, precise. I'll kind of merge those things together.
Managing Crystal Knows, do you find that like the percent breakdown is like 25, 25, 25, 25, or I'm sure it might be different. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And we've because we have hundreds of thousands, now millions of data points in Crystal of people that have taken the test, we can run that analysis. We actually published some of it in that book. So in general, broadly, it should be about even. However, there are lots of trends in cities, in job titles, and even in countries towards certain types. So like if anybody has any Israeli friends, right? Israeli culture tends to be a bit more aggressive, right? Israelis tend to skew more towards D, while Indian culture, a bit different, tends to skew more S. And we actually found that from data of many Israelis and Italians that have Israelis and Indians that have taken the Crystal assessment. So it's really, really interesting. Same with job titles. Certain job titles tend to skew towards a certain type. Many with the DI personality tend to be in sales or people-oriented roles. Accountants tend to skew CS. So there's lots of trends around things like that.
Fascinating. Did you find anything interesting about Nashville?
Nashville skews I, which is not surprising given the like music-oriented, kind of like free-flowing, while New York tends to skew more D. Also not surprising.
I do joke in Nashville, before any sales meeting, you have to have like 3 minutes of just like schmoozing, It's like
which is a very I thing to do. The C's hate that, by the way. So make sure that you don't have a C in the group, because he or she is thinking, oh my gosh, get this over with so we can actually get down to business.
Yeah. What other questions do folks have? Come on. Harrison asked in the chat, how could I use this to select a team? Like in hiring, how do you use this?
Such a great question. There's actually, we dedicate a whole chapter of the book to this. So in some cases, it depends on what the team is designed to do. So in general, having a balanced team can really be helpful, right? So if we have all Ds, like all me's, oh, it's going to go really fast, but we'll kill each other. We'll rip each other limb from limb. Whereas if we have an S in the room, right, he or she can help diffuse some of that intensity from the Ds, right? If it's all S's, everybody's going to be really nice to each other. But if there's a problem, nobody's going to want to bring it up to the surface. If it's all C's, everything's going to get done really well. It might not be the most creative, though. If it's all I's, everybody's going to talk and have a great time, and not that much is going to get done. So you need this balance of all of them to truly be effective. Now, with that said, and as you think about your own team, and we certainly do too, we look to try to create balance. We also look to find, and we have some tools in Crystal that we use to help with this. Like, we spec out for each job we're hiring for. We think we need to, like, for this sales role or product manager. I recently hired a product manager, and we said for this product role, we need someone who's very analytical, very detail oriented. We don't really need someone that is going to be a creative visionary. That's a certain type of product manager, but we have that from Drew, my business partner. So for this product manager, for our hire, we really need like a CD type person, someone who has the details and the analysis, but is willing to stand up for themselves and push for what they think. That's the D. So product managers could be lots of different disc types, but for what we needed, we use disc to narrow in and hire the right person.
Interesting.
So can you hear me?
Yes. Hey.
So kind of when determining someone's type, what are a few like key indicators you might have or use for yourself to kind of see what maybe someone leans towards?
Yeah. So, first, in general, if it's a coworker, the best way is to have them take the assessment. If it's for someone you don't know, you can use, like, for example, our personality AI tool that can actually predict their type from LinkedIn or a resume or something like that. If let's say you're in a scenario, you meet someone at a party and you're like trying to sense, all right, pick up who this person is. There's like lots of contextual clues. Let's talk about back, I don't know if everybody remembers, we used to like congregate in groups and kind of like see people moving around, and it was like an event back in the old days before COVID. And so so I'll use that as an example. We'll have to jog our memories a little bit, but in that type of situation, right? Someone who's more likely to be off having one-on-one conversations is much more likely to skew C, where someone who wants to be in a big circle with tons of people tends to skew more I. Someone that wants to really dive into a specific topic and just go really deep into it tends to skew C, though that can also be in some ways be an I trait too. Someone that tends to be really focused on like about their goals, what they're trying to work towards, tends to skew more D. Someone who tends to be a bit more soft-spoken, a bit less like here I am, and more like listening, probably would tend to skew more S. Now, all of these little clues that just in and of themselves don't tell the whole story, but when you piece them together, we could start to get a better picture. Like when we're on a call, let's say you're on a job interview or a customer call, and you haven't looked up the person, you don't know their disc type. How do they open up the call? Let's use Zap's example, right? You're on a sales call, and you decide to make some small talk for the first 3 minutes. Does it seem like that's resonating with the person, or do they kind of give you really quick answers? If they're giving you really quick answers, it's probably an indicator of stop with the small talk, let's get down to business. And if you're talking to a DC or a C-like person, they're going to probably want that. So it's really important because in Zap's case, she loves that small talk, but not everybody else does. And if she's talking to people that aren't the same type as her, they will like her a lot more if she talks to them the way they like, which is, even though she likes it, she'll cut the small talk and get right down to business with them. So just that was a little bit of a mush, but lots of different ways you can look for these indicators. How someone writes an email. If they send you an email very highly organized with lots of font styling and bulleted lists, tends to skew a bit more C and S. If they send you like quick emails where like the subject line is the email, probably tends to be more of a DI.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
Hey, Darius, I saw you type me a private question, but I didn't totally understand it. Could you unmute yourself and ask it possibly? Maybe you're shy. I didn't really get the question. I'm sorry.
Sure. I'm here.
Hey, Darius.
Oh, hey, Darius.
All right. So my question was basically, once you identify each person and what their disc is, what's one of the best sources that you recognize that can help you identify, help you manage that type of person?
I'm a bit biased here, but I'd have to say that's kind of what my company's tools do. So you could go, for example, on our website, we have tons of free resources that you could read up on each type, each relationship. So for example, let's say your employee is a C and you're a D. We have an article that you could go read that talks about a C and a D relationship and all the different dynamics of how those people could work together. And then like there are these more advanced tools that Crystal and others provide where you can kind of like build these custom reports to mix and match different personality types. So this is the cool thing about DISC. DISC is open source. Lots of people have written about it. We've written about it, others have too. It's easy to learn. There's lots of resources. What we found is critical, like for companies, for companies and anybody to be successful with DISC is like integrating it into the processes of how you work. Having every new employee take that DISC test and walk them through, here's how you and your manager are going to like your personal dynamics. Here's where some conflict might be. But yeah, I'd say, Darius, start with just like some like free articles online. There's a ton of them, including crystalknows.com/DISC. We've written a bunch of good ones.
Yeah, I even did it in sports teams. In college, we did DISC and we had people line up because we did it by like your percentile too of what letter. 1 to 100 of like who's on this. At the time I was like 98% D. I've like settled down slightly. But I had a couple of questions of people asking how this relates to Ocean and Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Ocean or Big Five as it's called, and Myers-Briggs are other personality frameworks. So think of them as peers to DISC. They all have pros and cons. There's a great resource, another free resource we made, crystalknows.com/personality types. I think it's personality-types. So if you want to send that check that on the URL and send it over. And it has a great overview of each of the personality frameworks and kind of compares them. So we love DISC because it's really easy to learn. It's very kind of universally applicable, especially in like work context. Myers-Briggs has a bit less scientific validity than DISC and is sometimes a little bit more amorphous in how to understand it. But it's also, we call it 16 personalities. You can also take that assessment on Crystal's site for free, crystalknows.com/16 personalities, I think. If you go to crystalknows.com/personality, you can find all the tests, but you could take the 16 personality one too. Ocean, also known as Big Five, is this other personality framework. It is quite a bit harder to understand and a bit less like tactically useful. It kind of shows you what percentage, like what percentile you land in compared to the rest of the population. So like you are 20% more open than all other people, which is like, cool, what do I do with that? Versus DISC, it's like really easy to understand what you do with it. But you can take the assessments for all of those on Crystal's site.
Awesome.
It's very interesting and very addictive. Take all these tests. Enneagram as well.
Yeah, what's your personal favorite?
Not surprisingly, I love DISC.
You like the DISC the best?
It clicks. It's so easy to remember. It's like, it really works. I mean, this is why it's kind of like it's a great passion for the startup that we're building here in Nashville. It's funny. I said this in our all hands this morning, and we joked that we should make it our tagline. I'm going to be a little less. I'm not going to use the word, but I was it's the opposite of BS. That is what DISC is. right? It's real, it's tangible. When you see it, you can like see how it plays out. It's the opposite of BS. It's really real. And that's why I love it so much.
What about astrology? I'm just kidding. I love astrology. Once you go through all the personalities, then you need something else. And you're like, astrology? What other questions do people have? Anything else? Last chances? Okay, we'll wrap up then. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you so much, Greg, for giving this presentation. So interesting. I'm going to send this recording out to everyone on Slack. But thank you, everyone. Thanks, Greg.
Yes, great to be here, Zap. Thanks for having me. Great to meet everybody. If anybody has any questions, of course, feel free to shoot me an email. But all the best. And thanks so much.
Bye.
Take care.